All right. Is Kevin in the room?
No, Supervisor Hogan came on Zoom.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You have Supervisors Bruno and Merlino here in the boardroom.
Okay.
Kevin was in the room.
I'm sorry, was I holding everyone up? I thought I had a few more minutes.
No, public safety was very quick, and Kevin's on his way. If it's all right with everybody, I think maybe we'll give Kevin another minute or two. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay.
Just a heads up, we are live on YouTube as of now.
Okay.
We're at large, we have nothing.
Which one did you want to start with, Kevin? Mr. Hajos, which one?
Ron, we'll start with Parks and Rec first.
Okay, Parks and Rec, okay.
Oh, geez, I saw a shadow here. The ghost is coming.
One. Amanda, are we all set?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to a special meeting of Public Works Committee. I appreciate you all agreeing to the meeting today. We'll move right into our agenda. First, let's start by approving the minutes of our previous meeting. Ms. Hogan on the motion, second.
Mr. Merlino.
Supervisor Merlino on the second. Any discussion? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we'll move into our Parks and Recreation agenda first. Kevin, what do you have in front of us today?
What we have on the agenda today is to request for a new contract for the use of the fairgrounds. As you all know, back in December, January, we put out an RFP for the use of the fairgrounds. We had one proposal that was submitted, and that was for a company by the name of Lamp Adirondack to use the fairgrounds for 108 days. At that meeting that I let everybody know about this RFP, Mr. Conover had created a negotiating team which consisted of Supervisor Hogan, Supervisor Garrity, and Supervisor Bruno. We have since met with this company and came up with the terms that you see in the request for the new contract. I'm not sure if Bruno or Mr. or Supervisor Hogan wants to add anything to that, but based on this, the vendor would use the fairgrounds starting, I apologize, I'm looking at it right now, it's in front of me, 6/14, and they would use it through 10/1 of this year for a total amount of $26,680. We would require a $2,000 deposit upon signing of the contract, and then two payments, one on 6/14 for half, and one on 8/17 for the remainder.
All right. Why don't we start by bringing this to the floor for consideration? Supervisor Hogan on the motion, second.
Supervisor Bruno.
Supervisor Bruno on the second. Thank you, everyone. And first, thank you to the team that worked on this. Supervisor Hogan, Supervisor Bruno and Supervisor Garrity, thank you very much. Let's open it up to discussion. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Mr. Hajos? There being no, I see Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Supervisor Conover. I had a question about what happened to the company that was there before. Isn't this a different one?
Yes, this is a totally different company. It's why we went out for a request for proposals. The company that was there, well, Kevin, why don't you respond to that?
The company that was there has since folded. They sold off all their equipment actually to this gentleman for Glamp Adirondack, and that's all I can tell you.
Right.
Okay, it's a new owner of basically transferred it over to this new person. Okay, thanks.
That's correct. That's correct. Any Supervisor Hogan?
Thank you. I do want to say, after talking with these guys, they seemed like a really quality organization. Their interest was in bringing a really positive experience to visitors to the county. They were looking at it very much in the same way that the old company was, but with some new twists, like they're attracting more groups. They were talking about having interest from bachelorette parties and things like that. They were very responsive to all of our questions. I felt very comfortable with them, which, as you guys know, I was not necessarily feeling that way before. So I'm really in support of this. But Kevin, I have a question for you. What was the date that they were going to vacate that you mentioned?
They're going to vacate on 10/1. They wanted to, originally I think we're staying through September 24th, but they wanted to capture the Americade and Balloon Fest traffic, so they think they want to extend for a couple more days beyond that.
And I didn't hear you cover, this is a 1 year.
Yeah, and I apologize, it is in the resolution request. This would be for a 1-year contract with the potential to extend for 1 more year, and I believe the increase was 5% for the following year.
And that extension, is that an elective on our part?
That would be on the approval of the Town of Warrensburg Supervisor and the Superintendent of Public Works.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hajos? There being none, are we ready for the question then? All those in favor of approving this lease arrangement with Glamp Adirondack signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It is carried. Thank you, Kevin. There being no other items to come before Parks and Recreation, we can go right into Public Works if that's all right. Kevin, what do we have in front of us today?
So we don't have any action agenda items right now. The only thing I have is kind of an information for discussion. I'm going to step back a little bit and give you a little bit of history on our federal aid projects and state aid projects as far as just compensation right away goes. So I can't remember when we started to receive our first federal aid project, but whenever that started, we have to go through a very rigorous process with federal highways as far as obtaining right of way from individuals. We follow what they refer to as a uniformed act. Within that uniformed act, you're supposed to do a third-party appraisal. Then you do negotiations with the property owner. If the property owner agrees to negotiations, then we typically go to a purchase agreement for that parcel or that property. And then from there, typically the county takes possession of that parcel. And then what we end up doing is doing a right-of-way certification, which allows us to construct the project. So this particular project that I'm giving you information on today is for Call Street. We've had a project up there for probably almost about 10 years. It's been in the works. We finally were able to probably within the last couple of years, obtained this project as a federal aid, I'm sorry, not a federal aid project, as a state aid project under Bridge New York. Under Bridge New York state aid project, they're funded by the state 100%. We looked at this project numerous times to determine whether or not, and we do this with every project, determine whether or not we would need to take right-of-way for this project. This is one of those projects that everything we did, we couldn't avoid very small parcels of right-of-way that we had to get the temporary easement on them. There were 3 total. One of them was for, I think 2 of them were for $100, and then one of them was for $200.
A little louder, Kevin, please.
Two of them was for $100. One of them was for $200. So again, when we look at these projects, we look at them to do everything possible to avoid right-of-way. In this particular project, we could not avoid right-of-way. So the next step for us was to go out and have our consultant do appraisals on these properties, and that's where they determine the amounts for each one of these properties for the $100 or the $200. From that just compensation, it was brought back to committee for the committee and the board to approve just compensations for each one of these parcels. Since then, the one parcel, we were unable to originally in the beginning get a hold of the property owner. Someone who owned the property passed on. The property was handed off to somebody else. That person actually lives in England. They didn't want to deal with us. They for $100, they didn't want anything to do with, dealing with us on this piece of property. So we under the Uniform Act, did everything possible we could under negotiations to try to reach a settlement with them. We were unable to. We had actually reached out to her attorney on this piece of property. They came back and said she's willing to negotiate, for this $100 if we pay the attorney's fees. So at that point, those attorney's fees become what we refer to as just compensation, above and beyond the original just compensation. We have a resolution in place from 2008 that allows for the chairman of the board to sign for just compensation for anything up to $2,000 above the original purchase price. So for this one, it was raised to the $100 for the property and the $1,100 for the attorney fees, brought it up to $1,200. So that $1,200 became our new just compensation. We, the county, me as the superintendent of public works, feel that this is justified. Based on the Uniform Act, if we are looking to obtain property, we try to do this in an expeditious way and hopefully negotiate a settlement so that we do not have to go to condemnation. This one in particular, if we couldn't settle, we would have had to gone to condemnation. Condemnation could have dragged us out possibly for another 3 or 4 months. We typically don't like to do that. We try to avoid that, at all costs. So with that being said, we think that this compensation for the attorney's fees to fall under the just compensation is a fair price for us to move the project forward. So again, for me, this is just an FYI. I have provided an email the other day to most to discuss the Uniform Act and how it works. One of the questions that came up in that email was how much should the county pay for an easement like this? The bottom line is the county, again, gets an appraiser through our company to our vendor to review and give us appraisal costs. We don't pick a number out of the sky. There's a process based on a Uniform Act that we follow. But there is what we refer to as part of just compensation, an administrative settlement. The administrative settlement is basically the purchase price of the property may exceed the offered amount as just compensation when reasonable efforts to negotiate an agreement with that amount have failed. This is an example of something that had failed until we said we would cover the cost of the attorney fees under just compensation. So I don't know what else to add, but I just wanted to bring the committee up to date on to where we're at with the just compensation, and I'll go from there.
Yeah, I think there was a concern that was raised by the chairperson relative to the question of the legal fees. Are they part of just compensation or not? And also there was a question in terms of any difference, if you will, between the different amounts that are being paid for this. Now, Kevin, this is a temporary easement that we're securing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, is Supervisor Sieber, Chairperson Sieber, on the phone? By
Good
any chance?
morning, Supervisor Conover. How are you?
Good, good, good. It'll save me trying to represent. This comes to us because the chairperson has to sign certain documents attesting to certain things, and she had some questions that I think needed to be brought to committee. And then with that, why don't I just turn it over to you at this point?
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt you. First, can everybody hear a little bit clearer on Zoom this morning?
A little better.
I know that we're all trying to speak directly into the microphones, but Mike Colvin found a very inexpensive approach to trying to make our microphones a little more effective. So hopefully you guys are hearing clearer as we're still in this Zoom world. Ron, is that not the case? Because I can really see your ear.
You can see my ear? A lot of people comment on my ears, but
you can hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, all right, good. So I'm bringing this up because, as all of us know, over the last couple months, of course, there's been a lot of contracts to sign as a result of all the different resolutions that come through this board and then other issues. One of the things that both Julie Butler and Mary Cassane's office has worked really hard on with the county administrator's office is a certification checklist when contracts come before the position of chair. I should never be the first signature. I should always be the last. And I think it's really important that I understand if there's concerns from the department head or from the county attorney's office or from other supervisors on whether or not those contracts reflect the resolution. I've been doing my due diligence and reading those that I'm able to, and then also reaching out to those particular departments with any questions. This one came before me, and I want to say that Robert Twilliger, he did an excellent job in talking with me about this particular contract. But one of the questions that I had looking at it at the time when this contract was initially presented to me, there was only 2 resolutions. It's now come to my attention there's 3 that address all of this, but they're really, they're older resolutions. And to Kevin Hajos's point, should you not be looking at a resolution just because it's old? No, but at the same point in time, if we have the ability to update some of these things, and I know Mary's office is working on looking at older resolutions and trying to update them so that they reflect the will of the board, and if not this board, at least the board right before us. But one of the concerns looking at this contract, there were 3 different owners, two with $100, one with $200, and then all of a sudden at this request to pay legal fees in the amount of $1,200. I was uncomfortable signing a contract that would authorize legal fees because when I initially met with Mary and Robert in person, I had asked, is this just compensation? Do we typically pay for lawyers' fees? Does this set a precedent? What about the other owners? Are they going to come forward saying, well, now I want more money? But when I look back at the resolutions, I didn't see where there was authorization for the chair to sign for legal fees. What I'm being told now is that there is a description within just compensation that would include legal fees, but your language in your resolution does not say anything about that. So I asked for an updated resolution to come out of committee, not to hold up a project, recognizing it's, of course, important that your resolutions are carried through, but to identify the fact that, what happens if they come back and they say, well, now we had to review additional documents and there's additional legal fees, or does that get waived off on? What's the responsibility, with this person living overseas? I had a bunch of questions around it. And I needed time to look into it as well. So, we can fast track everything as much as possible, but I had multiple conversations with Robert about it. I've spoke with Mary and Robert. I've spoken with Kevin Hajos. I called up Ron Conover. And all I'd like to know is it worth updating a resolution that would allow your chair to sign for legal fees? Or if that's not necessary, Kevin has told me this is probably like a one-time thing, but increasing the just compensation now to reflect the total amount, recognizing a large portion of that is legal fees. Whatever this committee is comfortable with, or if you want to update that resolution for the board, but it is a little different than what y'all signed off on. So it was in that spirit that I was really hoping just to get the go-ahead of the people that made that decision in 2020, right? Kevin, when did the
The original just compensation for this particular one was 2020.
2020, because the other two resolutions are like 2007 and then 2000.
All three of them are in 2008.
Oh, okay, 2008. I don't know about any of you, but I wasn't even thinking about being on this board in 2008. So if we could just get a consensus, or if you'd like a new resolution or an amended one, but I'm happy to do the will of the board and sign away, but, you know, are there any problems that we need to be aware of? That was it.
Yeah, no, when I received a call from the chairwoman on this, of course, I said, you never sign anything that you're uncomfortable signing, period. And if necessary, we'll bring it back to committee and find out what the sense is of the committee. And maybe the question is not just to Kevin, but to the county attorney, if the county attorney is present, and that is the resolution as prepared satisfactory for paying the legal fees? Is there an attorney on the call?
Yeah, Ron, I'm here. Considering the consultant termed the attorney's fees as just compensation, we were comfortable with the contract being signed.
Okay. And would there be any harm in amending the resolution as an option and just say just compensation and legal fees? That could go to the board as early as this coming meeting, correct?
Yeah, I think anything that comes out of this committee would go to the board on the 19th.
Right.
Yes, it would.
So that's what I think we're deliberating on here today. For those present, you know, do we want to recommend to the chairperson to go ahead and sign it, or do we want to amend the resolution to be more specific? Basically, at this stage, I think I would say, what's the pleasure of the committee regarding this?
Evan,
I think the good thing here is that the opinion of the attorney's now been stated for the record, which it wasn't prior. So that's a good thing, right? And do we need to move forward with an amended resolution, or Amanda?
Kevin Hajos would like to speak.
Sure. Kevin?
Ron, I want to go again and add that, you know, we follow a very rigorous, you know, kind of process with this right-of-way acquisition. In fact, I have a folder here in front of me. This is just one folder for one piece of property that we did on one project in, you know, up in Oregon. You know, I've been here since 2008. I will tell you that I did 93 of these on Corinth Road when we did the Corinth Road project.
Sure.
We follow a very stringent process from the Federal Highway as well as the state. And again, under the Uniformed Act, there's basically what it says is the following basic acquisition policies applies to the acquisition in question as they do for all other acquisitions. Number one, expeditious acquisition. The agency shall make every reasonable effort to acquire the real property expeditiously by negotiation, us being the agency. Number two is the administrative settlement. The purchase price for the property may exceed the amount offered as just compensation when reasonable efforts to negotiate an agreement at that amount have failed, and an authorized agency official approves such administrative settlement as being reasonable, prudent, and in the public interest. I wanted to kind of address something that Chairwoman Seaver had asked about the other parcels that are out there. The other parcels that are out there, if for some reason somebody on any project that ever wants to come back and say, you're not paying me enough money, then, and if the county doesn't feel that we should be paying that amount, then it would go to eminent domain, and we would go through the condemnation process. But by doing these negotiations and working out something like this, and considering it just comp or an administrative settlement, then we don't have to get to that stage of going to condemnation.
Well, having been in the chairman's seat and having seen the mountains of contracts that we're supposed to sign and be aware of and be cognizant of, I can understand the due diligence that Chairperson Sieber is going through here. Claudia, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess I'm what was that Kevin Hages was reading from? And it sounded like we can increase the amount that we pay, but not because it's necessarily attorney's fees, but just because we want to try to negotiate in order to get the property purchased in a more amicable situation. Is that the case? Because I also heard that the county attorney say something about a consultant had advised us that it was acceptable, or did I mishear that?
Kevin, do you want to respond first? Well, you're reading from some taking provisions there. Are they federal or state?
This is the federal, but the state follows the same guidelines with their state aid projects as well, and it's called Supervisor Bramer, the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition for Federal and Federally Aided Assistance Program. It's the Uniformed Act, and I believe it's been out since probably 1970.
That doesn't speak directly to attorney's fees. It just says negotiate in good faith.
It says administrative settlements. Yeah, it doesn't specifically state what those I mean, someone could come back and say that they wanted a flower planted in their front yard, and we compensate them for, just compensation for that. It doesn't spell out every particular thing for just compensation.
Okay, could the county attorney give her opinion again one more time, just
Sure.
please?
Mary, are you still on the line? Could you give your opinion? I think the question is relative to whether attorney fees are included into the general definition of just compensation.
Sure. If she's talking about the opinion I already gave, I said that our consultant who draws up the documents for us put the attorney's fees under the just compensation. They defined it as just compensation, which is why we were comfortable with the chairwoman signing the contract.
Right.
Oh, who's our consultant on that?
Greenman Peterson.
Okay, some engineering firm. Is that what it is, Kevin? Yeah. Okay.
And just in terms of the timeline on this project, when were you planning on breaking ground on this, Kevin?
This summer.
Oh, wow. Wow. Amanda?
Chairwoman Sieber would like to speak.
Sure. Chairperson Sieber, go ahead.
Chairman, just for the record to reflect here as we discuss this today, this was not the initial opinion that I was given. When I was first approached about this contract, the initial opinion was that I did not have this consultant document in front of me. I was told that just compensation was not to include legal fees, and that, of course, I had every right to be uncomfortable in signing it because the resolution that everyone passed on this board it wasn't about $1,300 or $1,200. It was about $100. So when it came to me, that's when I asked about that additional dollar amount. There's an older resolution that allows your chair to sign up to $2,000. But the question was, do legal fees get included as just compensation? In those initial meetings, those answers to me were no, and that we would look into it. We would get the consultant, get this report, and that we would dig deeper. And that's what Robert did. In the course of doing that, what I was asking is, should we be updating that older resolution to include language that would allow legal fees? If that's not necessary and this committee is comfortable now knowing that you've got an increase of over $1,000 on a resolution that you signed last year, that's fine. I'm happy to sign away. Do you want that resolution updated? If not, just could I have a consensus of the committee that it's fine to go ahead and sign that, and the record will obviously reflect it in the minutes?
Well, good. I was about to ask you what, since you're the one that has to sign, what you would be comfortable with. So let me ask the committee, what's the pleasure of the committee at this stage?
Go ahead, speak.
Supervisor Hogan?
Thank you. I'm fine with going forward with a signature now, but obviously we need to explore this more. So,
Yeah, I think the chairperson's correct. That I saw some communications that would have made me scratch my head a little bit as well, but I think that we've worked our way through that. I would agree with your recitation of the how this unfolded, Rachel. It's exactly as you say. And this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. I mean, you have a question, it needs to be answered. It's just that simple. All right, then, why don't we, the consensus, if I understand the committee, what Supervisor Hogan is saying, does the balance of the committee share the opinion that the chairwoman should, and the Public Works should move forward as is? Amanda?
Mr. Bruno would like to speak?
Sure. Supervisor Bruno.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with not holding this up. I think it's okay to sign it, but I also think it's valuable to update, clarify, call it what you would like, that original resolution that was 2008 or whatever it was. So I wouldn't hold this up, but I would add some clarity to that original resolution. Thank you.
Okay. And let me see who else. Supervisor Merlino, Supervisor Garrity.
I believe in, just Supervisor Merlino, what Mr. Bruno just said. I just always, in all my years, worry about putting extra stuff into the contract, because once people start reading it, everybody will want to get a lawyer and we'll be paying more and more. I think this should be left alone. It hasn't bothered us since 2008. But we should move forward with it and maybe discuss it a little further down the road.
Supervisor Garrity.
Well, I think there's rules and regulations we have to follow, and maybe what we do is they need to be updated in the future, so you know what's included in the just compensation. I mean, there must be a list of what you can include and what you can't include in just compensation, I would think. But I'm okay with moving ahead with the project. We need to move it along. It's been out there for quite a time, but it's a good question to ask whether attorney fees should be included or shouldn't be included. And whatever the committee is comfortable, if you want to revise the resolution from whatever date it was to say attorney fees are part of the just compensation, I'm all right with that too.
Sure. Is Mr. Thomas on the phone? Amanda?
No, Mr. Thomas is not here, but Kevin Hajos would like to speak again.
Sure. Kevin?
I just wanted to add on too, is this actually is not a contract. This is actually just the chairwoman signing for correspondence for just compensation. The next step in this would be the purchase agreement, which I believe that that she'll sign off as the actual contract to pay. This is just signing for just compensation, which is a correspondence and nothing more.
All right. I think at this stage, Chairperson Sieber, I think the consensus of the committee is go ahead and sign and let's move forward with this. But Kevin, going forward, let's provide as much detail as the regulations provide relative to these types of compensations. Is that what I'm hearing today? Rather than the general phraseology, if there's things that are included, what are those specific things that are included? Is that what I'm hearing today?
That's what you're hearing. Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification. And if Robert, who's in the room, again, thank you. If he doesn't go far, I'm happy to sign away for your just compensation. But I agree with Kevin Garrity. I mean, if there is a way to kind of get a list of what is included, that would be really helpful. But this is how our process is supposed to work. And so I do appreciate the time and attention everyone's spending on it. And I do hope that we make an effort to be updating those outdated resolutions as these things come up, because I do think what Supervisor Bruno said is a point well taken.
Very well. Then is there any other business to come before the committee? There is no other business. Then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Garrity.
Moved by Mr. Garrity, second by Ms. Hogan. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for being at the special meeting today. Appreciate it. Oh, one thing, Donna, anything on YouTube?